the economy will be healthier if people buy things. Okay? Get people to buy stuff, and that makes the economy healthy. Now, I'll just say it's obvious that that isn't the case, because if there's nothing to buy, then what does that mean? So there must be things there to buy. In other words, production has to happen first. And where did the things come from? So for a government to set a policy that says consume, 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 according to Keynesian economics, that's how you have a healthy economy. But according to reality, you have to produce it first. And they just wouldn't care about that fact. Or they would say, yeah, I know, quit being silly. Of course you have to produce it first, but the point is consumption, they would say. You know, they've got it backwards, though. Now, in spite of the fact that you've heard, and it's been proved by numbers, by many people, that housing is an investment. Okay, you've heard that, and then that's been proven. Actually buying a single-family home is not usually an investment. It's only when the market gets really out of whack that in the short term, in the short term of 5 to 10 years, you can make money buying a house and reselling it. But that's only when the market's on a wild upswing that'll have to be corrected. Okay? So generally, houses, 20, 30, 40-year investments, they're not investments. It is consumption. It's consuming your money. Your money's being dumped into it, and you're to live there for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. If you don't want to move around, fine, do that. And sometimes the value of your house may go up, and you may be able to sell out. That'll happen for some people sometimes, especially when the government's screwing in the market. But other things being equal, the value of the house is not going to appreciate in all cases across the nation, everywhere, at all times, enough to stay ahead of the purchase price. It's just not going to. That's a short-term, freakish thing introduced by government legislation and tinkering. It's something that has to be corrected in the end, and a lot of people are going to be holding an empty bag when it's done. Although some people did make millions of dollars buying in at one price and selling out at double that within a few months, you know. But that was just completely insane. And banks were writing the checks for this. And guess what? A lot of those houses were sold in the hopes that they would appreciate in value and be sold as a profit. And all of a sudden the value crashed. And like I said, people are standing there holding the bag. People have dumped millions of their dollars in, all of a sudden have $1 million worth of houses. And no one to buy them. Now that being said, what is today? January the 8th. Yesterday's Wall Street Journal announced on the little blurbs on the front page that housing occupancy, or pardon me, apartment occupancy fell to an all-time 30-year low. It's been 30 years since it was this drastic, the number of people living in houses. Now, part of the reason for that was because at the end of the 70s, or during the 70s, there was a massive amount of inflation. And inflation causes you to want to consume your money now, because if you sit on it, prices are going to go up next week. And prices just rose throughout the 70s drastically. And people who had $100,000 in 1970, that was a fair fortune, because you could buy a new car for $1,000. You know, at the end of 1970, a new car had gone up to $5,000 or $6,000. That's an enormous increase in price. And what did people do with their money then? They tended to want to put it someplace where it was essentially consumed most effectively. And housing tends to be where they dump money. In a high interest rate situation, you dump your money into long-term investment. That happened in the 1970s. This has happened again, but not this time because of high interest rates, high inflation. This time because of low interest rates and the government pushing housing. So let's talk a little bit about where the housing bubble we got today is and how the Fed's involved in that housing bubble. The Federal Reserve sets a key interest rate note. It doesn't set all the interest rates in the nation, just sets one interest rate note, and that is the overnight borrowing amount. And banks borrow overnight and pay it back the next day, and then borrow again overnight. And right now, they borrow billions this way, and it goes on day after day after day. This is, if you were in the world of finance, you would know more about this, probably more than me. But they can borrow right now these gargantuan sums overnight and pay back the next day for free. And guess what they can do while they're holding the money? They can borrow up to a 10-to-1 leverage on it. And they can get gargantuan sums right now for zero. And why is the government able to do this? Because they own the money supply. They can print money. Nobody else can make money. Nobody else can produce money. Coin money, as it used to be called, but now it's just print. Okay. So in the 1990s, it's the affirmative action stuff, and Bill Clinton come and they say, well, why aren't Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac borrowing to people of color more often, or ethnic people, right? Blacks and Hispanics and immigrants. Well, they borrow a lot, actually a fair share more is borrowed per capita to Asians than to whites, but the blacks and Hispanics are down there below the whites. And why is this? This must be institutionalized racism. What should we do? Well, the government should fix it. Obviously the government should fix it. How? Well, let's just tell the banks they have to loan within per capita rates of this neighborhood that's got so many blacks. You have to make so many loans to blacks. So they're going to be happy once in a while when a black person walks through the door. Not that black people are all too lazy to make a payment or too responsible to keep up their house, but let's admit it, some of them are, just like some whites are. And they, I think, deserve to live in an apartment their entire life. But if you're basically going to pay a person to take a house, which is what they'll do sometimes, because that you buy the house, say it took $1,000 or $2,000, $3,000 down. It's not a great house. It's just it's a check mark in your mortgage area, right? It's low income area. That mortgage is fairly small, but there's a check mark next to here's a black person with a house. Not all black people are going to tear their house apart. Not all white people are going to treat theirs well, but the market has discovered over the last 50 years that on average you're better off loaning your money to a white person. Now, in order to stop that, they just made a law. And fast forward 10 years, and you've got President Bush, after Clinton goes out of office, President W. Jr., bragging that there are more homeowners now than ever before in the history of the United States. This is not necessarily a good thing we see now as we fast forward a few more years past him. But we're past when he said that. As we were getting junked up on all these houses, injecting our economic veins basically with a housing boom, people realized along the way that we've got quite a beautiful economic stimulant here, because every house that gets purchased on the mortgage market gets mortgaged. A new one sometimes needs to be built, right? As the existing house supply dwindles and is purchased up, the prices raise and it looks more profitable to build houses now, and the prices all across the board start going up. You see how this happens. And every house that gets built needs a refrigerator, a washer, a dryer, probably a whole lot of furniture, maybe not all, some of it might come from an apartment or something, but by and large, when people build a brand new house, there is quite a lot of stuff that gets purchased brand new out of the economy to fill it. Now, the more of those you can have being purchased every month, the more washers and dryers and TVs and everything else. Massive stimulation to the economy. We got addicted to that. We loved that bit. So now let's sum up this area. We're about to go into the really good meaty stuff and then we'll be done. Let's sum up this area by saying that if the Federal Reserve weren't able to, first of all, choose the interest rate at which banks can borrow money so that they have a massive supply of cheap money, that's the first ingredient. But second, it's able to get legislation enacted, like the fair housing legislation, where it increases the amount of mortgages being taken out. Now, You couldn't normally do that. Normally the free economy would constrict the money supply